The slap echoed through the ballroom so sharply that 300 wedding guests stopped breathing before the music had time to stop. Evelyn Cole's face turned with the impact, one pearl earring catching the chandelier light as silence swept across the reception hall. For half a second, no one moved. The string quartet froze mid-note. A server stood motionless with a tray of champagne glasses. Even the photographer lowered his camera, uncertain whether he had just witnessed a private family argument or the moment an entire marriage began to collapse. Madison Whitmore stood in front of Evelyn in her custom ivory gown, her chest rising beneath layers of silk and hand-sewn lace. Her right hand remained suspended near her shoulder, as though she had not yet accepted what had done. The bride's carefully arranged blonde hair was still flawless, but the expression beneath it was no longer the polished smile she had worn through the ceremony. Her eyes burned with humiliation, anger, and the certainty that everyone in the room had betrayed her. "You had no right," Madison said, her voice low and shaking. Evelyn slowly turned her face back toward her. A faint red mark had begun to appear along her cheek, but she did not raise a hand to cover it. She stood perfectly still in a deep blue dress that was elegant without being extravagant, her silver-streaked hair swept into a simple twist at the back of her head. She looked less shocked than disappointed. That calmness unsettled Madison more than shouting would have. "I asked for the truth," Evelyn said. "That is not the same thing as taking something from you. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "No," Evelyn replied quietly. "You did that yourself." A murmur moved through the nearest tables. Madison's mother, Claire Whitmore, rose so quickly that her chair scraped against the marble floor. Her father, Richard, remained seated for one stunned second longer, staring at Evelyn as though something about her face had awakened a memory he could not immediately place. At the head table, Ethan Cole pushed back his chair and crossed the space between them before Madison could speak again. He stepped in front of his mother, one arm reaching behind him as if to make sure Evelyn was still standing. His dark tuxedo jacket hung open, and the gold wedding band on his left hand caught the same light as the crystal glasses scattered across the tables. "What did you just do?" he asked. Madison looked at him as though he were the one behaving irrationally. "She humiliated me in front of everyone. You hit my mother because she kept provoking me." Ethan's face changed. The disbelief in his eyes hardened into something colder. "Nothing she said gave you the right to put your hands on her. You don't know what happened. I was standing 10 feet away." Claire hurried toward them, forcing a strained smile for the guests gathering around the dance floor. "Everyone needs to calm down. This is a family matter." Ethan turned toward her. "Your daughter struck my mother in the middle of our wedding reception, and we will address it privately," Claire whispered. "Not with every phone in this room recording." Several guests immediately lowered their devices, though none of them stopped watching. Evelyn touched Ethan's arm. "I'm all right." "No, you're not." "I said I'm all right. That does not mean what happened was acceptable." Her voice remained measured, but Ethan knew that tone. It was the voice she had used when landlords ignored broken heaters in the apartment buildings she managed early in her career, when bank officers dismissed her before learning she controlled the fund they wanted access to, and when people confused composure with weakness. Madison looked past Ethan at Evelyn. "Tell him what you did." "I asked hotel security to review the camera footage before anyone searched my purse," Evelyn said. "You were walking away with my grandmother's bracelet. I was carrying a gift box your mother handed me, and now the bracelet is missing. Then the cameras will show where it went." Madison laughed once, without humor. "Of course you want cameras. You've turned my reception into some kind of investigation. You ordered security to lock the ballroom doors because something worth $80,000 disappeared, and you decided the only black woman near the bridal suite must have taken it." The room seemed to grow even quieter. Madison's expression tightened. "Do not make this about race." Evelyn met her eyes. "I did not." Ethan looked from his mother to his bride, and something painful passed across his face. "Madison, did you ask to search anyone else?" She hesitated. That hesitation answered more than words could. Near the ballroom entrance, Aaron Delgado, the hotel's general manager, hurried toward Richard Whitmore. Aaron had spent the last 15 minutes speaking with security, but now his attention was fixed entirely on Evelyn. He had honored her request for discretion when she arrived, but the public accusation had changed the situation. He stopped beside Richard and whispered something too quietly for the guest to hear. Richard's face lost its color. "Are you certain?" he asked. Aaron nodded. "I recognized her when she arrived. I confirmed it with corporate before coming over." Richard looked again at Evelyn, no longer seeing a woman in a simple blue dress or the mother his daughter had dismissed throughout the evening. He saw the photograph from a confidential investor file locked inside his office. The woman whose firm could decide whether Whitmore Hospitality survived the next quarter. Madison noticed her father staring. "Dad, say something." Richard did not answer her. His eyes remained on Evelyn. Across the ballroom, the band members lowered their instruments, and the final vibration of the interrupted song disappeared into the silence. Aaron leaned closer to Richard and spoke in a voice that only the two of them were meant to hear. "That woman is Evelyn Cole, founder of Meridian Equity Group." Richard's hand tightened around the back of his chair. Aaron glanced toward Madison, then toward Ethan standing protectively beside his mother. "And she may be the only person left who can save your company." 6 hours before Madison Whitmore slapped the woman who could save her family's empire, she welcomed Evelyn Cole with the kind of smile people reserve for someone they have already decided does not matter. The afternoon light reflected off the glass entrance of the Grand Marlowe Hotel in downtown Chicago as Evelyn stepped from a black sedan carrying a small overnight bag and a garment case. She wore a cream wool coat over a simple navy dress, pearl earrings, and low heels chosen for comfort rather than attention. No assistant followed her. No security detail waited at the curb. The driver placed her luggage beside the revolving door, wished her a pleasant evening, and pulled away before anyone from the Whitmore family noticed the car. Evelyn preferred it that way. At 58, she had spent more than 3 decades learning how quickly people revealed themselves when they believed she had nothing they wanted. Inside the lobby, hotel employees moved between towering flower arrangements while technicians tested lights for the evening reception. A white aisle runner stretched toward the ballroom, and gold initials had been projected onto the marble wall. M and E, surrounded by hundreds of fresh roses. Ethan Cole stood near the elevators in his tuxedo pants and an open white shirt, speaking with the wedding coordinator. The moment he saw his mother, his face changed from controlled stress to genuine relief. He crossed the lobby and wrapped both arms around her. "You made it. Your messages suggested the wedding might be canceled if I arrived 3 minutes later." That was Madison's mother. I recognized the punctuation. Ethan laughed, but the tension beneath it remained. He took Evelyn's garment case and glanced toward the ballroom doors before lowering his voice. "Mom, I need to ask you something. That sentence has never led to anything convenient. Please don't tell the Whitmores that your firm is Meridian today." Evelyn studied him. Ethan was 34, broad-shouldered, thoughtful, and more nervous than he had been before any courtroom argument in his career. He worked as an attorney for a nonprofit housing organization and had built a life deliberately separate from his mother's wealth. Most people who knew him professionally understood that Evelyn was successful, but very few knew the full scale of what she had created. Meridian Equity Group owned interests in housing, renewable energy, logistics, and hospitality companies across the country. Financial publications estimated Evelyn's net worth in the billions, though she rarely granted interviews and avoided the social circuit that made other wealthy families easy to recognize. "What exactly did you tell them?" she asked. "That you built an investment firm after years in community development and managing apartment buildings." "All true. I didn't give them the company name." Evelyn watched his face. "Does Madison know?" Ethan hesitated. "She knows you built an investment firm." "That was not my question. She knows I grew up comfortable after you became successful. She doesn't know the scale, or that the firm is Meridian." Evelyn's expression softened, though concern remained. "Why not?" "Because I wanted her family to meet you without turning the wedding into a business opportunity. Richard asks everyone what they own before he asks what they care about. Claire measures people by who sits near them at charity dinners. I wanted them to know you as my mother. And Madison, I wanted the same from her. The answer was honest enough to worry Evelyn. You're asking me to help test the woman you're marrying on the day you marry her. No, I'm asking you not to let money enter the room before you do. Evelyn looked toward the ballroom, where workers were placing crystal glasses at tables named after European cities. If she needs my bank statement to respect me, the problem began long before today. She doesn't. Ethan answered too quickly. He heard it himself and looked away. Evelyn touched his arm. I won't announce anything, but I will not lie if someone asks me directly. That's fair. And Ethan, whatever happens today, I am not here to evaluate your marriage. I know. I'm here because you're my son, and you asked me to stand beside you. His shoulders eased slightly. Thank you. A hotel manager approached from across the lobby. Aaron Delgado was in his mid-40s, dressed in a charcoal suit with a discreet name badge. He began with the polished smile of someone greeting a guest, then stopped when he recognized Evelyn. Ms. Cole. His voice carried immediate respect. Ethan noticed. Evelyn extended her hand before Aaron could say more. Mr. Delgado, it's been several years. Aaron recovered quickly. Welcome to the Grand Marlowe. We're honored to have you. Today I'm simply the groom's mother. The message beneath the words was clear. Aaron gave a slight nod. Of course. Please let me know if you need anything. As he walked away, Ethan exhaled. That was close. He managed discretion without pretending not to know me. It is a useful skill. They took the elevator to the bridal floor, where the atmosphere changed from elegant preparation to carefully concealed panic. Bridesmaids moved between rooms carrying garment bags, makeup cases, and champagne. Claire Whitmore stood in the hallway, directing employees as though she were managing an emergency command center. She wore a pale silver gown and an expression of permanent dissatisfaction. Ethan, the photographer needs you downstairs in 20 minutes, she said before offering Evelyn a brief embrace that never quite became warm. Evelyn, how nice that you could come. I wouldn't miss my son's wedding. Claire's eyes moved over Evelyn's coat, shoes, and modest jewelry with the speed of an appraiser. Of course, Madison has been very generous about making sure everyone feels included. Before Evelyn could answer, the bridal suite door opened and Madison appeared in a silk robe, her blonde hair pinned in preparation for the veil. She was beautiful in a precise, carefully managed way, and when she saw Ethan, her expression brightened with what appeared to be genuine affection. She kissed his cheek, then turned to Evelyn. You're here. I am. Madison embraced her lightly. I hope the hotel wasn't difficult to find. The driver managed. Something flickered in Madison's eyes at the word driver, but she smiled again. We've placed you at the family table for dinner. The seating chart became complicated because several of my father's business partners confirmed late. Ethan frowned. She's my mother. Of course she's at the family table. I said she was. Madison's tone remained sweet, but the muscles near her mouth tightened. I'm only explaining why we had to rearrange a few things. A young banquet captain entered carrying revised place cards. Naomi Brooks was composed and professional, but Madison's expression hardened the moment she noticed one card had been printed in the wrong shade of gold. We approved champagne gold, not yellow gold, Madison said. Naomi examined it. I'll have the print team replace it before guests enter. This should have been checked an hour ago. The final seating changes arrived 20 minutes ago. That isn't my problem. Evelyn watched Naomi absorb the criticism without reacting. Ethan appeared ready to intervene, but Madison turned back to him with a smile, and the moment passed. 20 minutes later, while Ethan went downstairs for photographs, Evelyn walked toward the guest elevator. Near the end of the hallway, an open conference room door revealed Richard Whitmore, speaking urgently with two men in dark suits. A thick presentation folder lay on the table between them. Evelyn would have continued past if the silver emblem on its cover had not caught the light. Meridian Equity Group. She slowed, just enough to hear Richard say, if their investment committee delays again, we will not make the debt payment next quarter. One of the men closed the door before Evelyn could hear more. She stood alone in the hallway, staring at the place where the Meridian logo had disappeared. Ethan believed the Whitmores had no idea that she was the woman behind the firm. But they were not simply hosting a wedding that evening. They were waiting for a decision from her company, And somewhere behind the flowers, champagne, and perfect smiles, Richard Whitmore's entire empire was running out of time. The first crack in Madison Whitmore's perfect image appeared before the wedding ceremony even began, and Evelyn Cole was the only person in the room who seemed to notice how quickly the bride covered it. 40 minutes after Evelyn saw the Meridian Equity folder disappear behind the conference room door, the bridal floor had become a carefully managed performance of silk, flowers, and rising panic. Makeup artists moved between mirrors, bridesmaids searched for missing earrings, and hotel employees carried revised seating cards through the hallway, while Claire Whitmore issued instructions without ever lowering her voice. Madison stood near the center of the bridal suite in her wedding gown, surrounded by photographers and attendants who praised every detail as if admiration were part of their contract. The ivory silk fit her perfectly. The lace had been sewn by hand, and the cathedral-length veil spread across the carpet like something designed for a magazine cover rather than a real ceremony. Whenever a camera pointed toward her, Madison smiled with effortless warmth. The moment it turned away, the smile disappeared. Naomi Brooks entered carrying the final seating chart and approached carefully. "The replacement place cards are finished," she said. Madison glanced at the tray without thanking her. "Where's the revised family table?" Naomi placed the chart on a side table and pointed to the front section of the ballroom. "We kept Ethan's mother beside him, as originally approved." Mr. Whitmore's business guests were moved to the second table. Madison's expression tightened. "That is not what I asked for." The groom confirmed the arrangement with the wedding coordinator. "The groom is taking photographs." Naomi remained composed. "He called 5 minutes ago." Madison looked toward Ethan's empty place beside the window, then lowered her voice. "Move Evelyn to table 12. Evelyn stood several feet away while a stylist adjusted Claire's necklace. Table 12 was near the rear service entrance, where distant relatives and last-minute guests had been placed. Naomi hesitated. "She is the groom's mother. I'm aware of who she is. The family table has an open seat. That seat is for Mr. Langford from Halcyon Capital." Naomi looked down at the chart. "His office declined the invitation last week. His assistant called this morning. He may attend. Then we can add a place sitting beside Mr. Whitmore." Madison's jaw tightened. "I'm not asking for alternatives." The room grew quieter around them, though no one openly stopped working. Evelyn watched Naomi take a slow breath. "I'll need Ethan's approval before moving his mother." Madison stepped closer. "Your job is to execute the event plan, not negotiate family decisions." Naomi's expression remained professional, but the strain around her eyes deepened. "My job is also to follow the signed seating plan. Your job is whatever this hotel needs it to be for the next 6 hours." Claire finally turned away from the mirror. "Madison, darling, not today. I'm trying to prevent a seating disaster." "Then let Naomi fix it." Madison looked at Evelyn as though noticing her presence for the first time. "I'm sure you understand. My father's partners have flown in from New York and Dallas. There are relationships involved that affect hundreds of employees." Evelyn met her eyes. "And moving the groom's mother to the back of the room protects those employees?" Madison gave a small laugh. "It protects the structure of the evening. Your structure seems very sensitive." Claire's hand froze near her necklace. One bridesmaid looked down to hide a smile. Madison stepped closer to Evelyn, keeping her voice pleasant enough for anyone watching from across the room. "This wedding is more complicated than it looks. Most expensive things are. There are expectations." "Whose?" "People who understand how these events work." Evelyn did not look away. "I have attended a few." Before Madison could answer, Ethan entered in his tuxedo, adjusting one cuff. His expression brightened when he saw Madison, but then he noticed Naomi holding the seating chart and the tension in the room. "What happened?" Madison turned toward him with instant softness. "Nothing. We are fixing a last-minute problem." "What problem?" Naomi answered before Madison could stop her. "There was a request to move Ms. Cole from the family table." Ethan's face changed. "Why?" Madison reached for his hand. "Because my father's investment partner may come, and the front table is already crowded." "Then move the investor." "Ethan, this is important to my father. My mother is important to me." Madison's smile thinned. I never said she wasn't. Then why are we discussing whether she belongs at our table? Silence settled again. Evelyn stepped forward before the argument could widen. Leave the seat where it is. If the guest arrives and there is truly no room, I could decide whether I want to move. Ethan shook his head. You should not have to decide that. And yet I am perfectly capable of it. Madison relaxed slightly, recognizing an exit. Exactly. Evelyn understands. Ethan looked at his mother, then at Madison. He wanted to believe the tension came from nerves, from schedules, from a wedding that had grown too large for anyone to manage gracefully. It has been a difficult morning, he said. Madison touched his lapel. That is all this is. He nodded, but the certainty did not fully return to his face. As the ceremony approached, guests began filling the ballroom downstairs. Evelyn helped Ethan straighten his tie near the elevator, while Madison remained inside with her bridesmaids. You do not need to protect me from a seating chart, Evelyn said. I know. Then stop looking like you are about to cross-examine your own wedding. Ethan gave a tired smile. She is under pressure. Pressure reveals habits. It rarely creates them. Madison is not usually like this. Evelyn heard the defense, but she also heard how much Ethan needed it to be true. Then today will pass, she said gently, and you will have the rest of your marriage to learn which version was real. Ethan looked at her, but the elevator doors opened before he could answer. An hour later, after the ceremony, Evelyn returned to the bridal floor to retrieve the wrap she had left in a preparation room. The hallway was almost empty now, the noise of cocktail hour drifting upward from the ballroom below. As she approached the open bridal suite door, she heard Claire speaking inside. You need to be more careful with Ethan. He noticed the seating issue. Madison answered in a low, irritated voice. I know. Then stop making his mother the problem. She is the problem. She watches everything like she is judging me. She is his mother. And after tonight, she goes back to whatever investment and community project she does, while I have to manage the life Ethan is building with me. Claire sighed. You only have to get through one evening. Madison's reply came without hesitation. I know. I can tolerate his mother for one evening. Evelyn stopped in the hallway with one hand resting against the wall. Inside the room, Claire began discussing photographs as though nothing important had been said. Evelyn did not enter. She quietly turned away, but as she reached the elevator, she saw Ethan standing at the far end of the hall. Judging by the look on his face, she was no longer the only person who had heard Madison's words. The bracelet vanished less than an hour after Ethan heard his new wife admit she could only tolerate his mother for one evening. And by the time anyone realized it was missing, every innocent detail had already been arranged to point toward Evelyn. Ethan stood at the far end of the bridal floor hallway, his face pale beneath the warm hotel lights. Evelyn could tell from the way he looked past her toward the open suite that he had heard enough. Neither of them spoke immediately. The cocktail reception was beginning downstairs, and distant laughter rose through the stairwell as if nothing in their world had shifted. How much did you hear? Evelyn finally asked. Ethan looked down at the wedding band on his hand. Enough. Then do not confront her while you are angry. His eyes lifted. She said she could tolerate you for one night. I heard her. And you want me to pretend I didn't? No. I want you to decide whether you are reacting to one cruel sentence or recognizing something you have been refusing to see. Ethan's jaw tightened. You always make the hardest answer sound reasonable. That is because easy answers usually arrive before the truth does. The elevator doors opened behind them. Guests stepped out laughing, and Evelyn moved aside before anyone noticed the tension. Go downstairs, she said. Your reception is starting. Mom, we will talk later. But whatever you choose to do it because you understand your marriage, not because you're trying to defend me. Ethan stared at her for another second, then nodded and walked toward the ballroom elevators. Evelyn waited until he disappeared before returning to the preparation room for her wrap. Inside the bridal suite, the atmosphere had changed from ceremony excitement to hurried cleanup. Bridesmaids were removing garment bags, collecting makeup cases, and carrying personal items toward locked storage closets. Tessa Lane, Madison's maid of honor, stood near the vanity holding a velvet jewelry case in one hand and answering a phone call with the other. She was trying to help Claire move valuables before the room was open to photographers and hotel staff. Yes, I know where the gift table is, Tessa said into the phone. No, I'm not leaving anything expensive out. She opened the velvet case, glanced at the antique diamond bracelet inside, then carried it toward a service car positioned in the open anteroom just outside the bridal suite. Another bridesmaid asked whether the stack of white boxes on the cart belonged downstairs. Distracted, Tessa placed the bracelet inside the nearest box to free one hand. The box already contained handwritten cards, a silver cake knife, and 2 small gifts for the couple. She closed the lid without thinking and slid it in a line with several identical boxes. Evelyn entered from the hallway moments later and found Claire standing beside the cart. "There you are," Claire said, holding out Evelyn's wrap. "Thank you." Evelyn took it and started to leave. "Actually, would you mind taking one of these boxes downstairs?" Claire asked. "The staff is behind, and everything needs to reach the reception before dinner." Evelyn looked at the row of white boxes. "Which one?" Claire pointed to the box Tessa had just closed. "That one should go to the gift table beside the ballroom entrance." Evelyn lifted it. The weight felt ordinary. "I can take it. I appreciate it." Claire had already turned away before Evelyn reached the elevator. The hallway camera nearest the elevators recorded Evelyn leaving the bridal floor at 5:42 p.m., carrying the white box in both hands. From that angle, it did not show what Tessa had placed inside the box or Claire handing it to Evelyn from the anteroom. Downstairs, the cocktail reception filled the Grand Marlowe's marble foyer. Guests in evening clothes gathered around tall tables. Waiters passed trays of champagne, and a jazz trio played near the ballroom doors. Evelyn carried the box to the gift table, where Naomi Brooks was arranging cards and checking names against a delivery list. "Claire asked me to bring this down," Evelyn said. Naomi accepted it. "Thank you. I'll move everything into secured storage before dinner." Evelyn nodded and joined the reception. She found Ethan near a window speaking with 2 college friends. His smile looked natural from a distance, but when their eyes met, the expression weakened. Madison stood across the room, receiving compliments. Her arm linked through Richard's while Claire adjusted the train of her gown for photographs. No one mentioned what had been said upstairs. For 20 minutes, the evening seemed determined to continue as if silence could preserve it. Then Claire appeared beside Tessa near the ballroom entrance. "Where's my mother's bracelet?" she asked. Tessa blinked. "I gave it back to you." "No, you were supposed to put it in the locked case." "I did." Tessa looked toward the bridal floor. I had it at the vanity." Claire's voice lowered. "That bracelet is worth $80,000. Madison heard the number and immediately stepped closer. "What's missing?" "Your grandmother's bracelet," Claire said. Tessa had it last. Tessa's face drained. "I put it somewhere safe while I answered the phone." "Where?" Madison asked. Tessa looked toward the gift table, then toward the elevator. There were several boxes. "I may have placed it in one for a minute." Naomi joined them. "The gift boxes that reached the storage room were moved there 10 minutes ago." "Then open them," Madison ordered. Naomi led them to the storage room and unlocked the door. The boxes were opened one by one. Cards, ribbons, small gifts, and another silver serving piece covered the table, but the bracelet was not among them. Madison's breathing grew faster. "Who handled the boxes?" Naomi answered carefully. Several staff members, Ms. Lane, Mrs. Whitmore, and Ms. Cole, brought one downstairs. Purse. Madison did not ask whether Evelyn had taken the bracelet. She ordered security to search her purse as if the answer had already been decided. The words carried across the marble foyer, quiet enough to sound controlled, but loud enough for every nearby guest to understand who had just been accused. Conversations faded around the cocktail tables. A waiter slowed with a tray of champagne. The jazz trio continued playing for several uncertain seconds before the pianist noticed the tension and let the song die beneath his hands. Evelyn stood beside an older guest near the ballroom entrance, her small navy purse resting against one hip. She looked at Madison, then at Aaron Delgado and the 2 hotel security officers approaching from a lobby. "Is there a reason everyone is staring at me?" she asked. Ethan reached her first. Madison says her grandmother's bracelet is missing. Evelyn glanced toward Claire. The bracelet from the bridal suite? Claire nodded, her face tight with embarrassment. Tessa had it near the vanity. We believe it may have been placed inside one of the gift boxes. And you asked me to carry one of those boxes downstairs. Yes, but the boxes in storage have been opened, and the bracelet is not there. Madison stepped closer. Security footage shows you leaving the bridal floor with it. Evelyn's expression did not change. The footage shows me carrying a closed box your mother handed me. It shows you had access to the bracelet. So did your mother, your maid of honor, your bridesmaids, the photographers, and every employee who entered that area. One security officer looked toward Aaron, waiting for direction. Aaron kept his voice calm. Ms. Whitmore, hotel policy does not allow us to search a guest property without consent or specific evidence. The evidence is on camera. The camera shows Ms. Cole transporting a package at your mother's request. Then let her open her purse, Madison said. If she has nothing to hide, this ends in 30 seconds. Evelyn studied her. Would you say the same thing to every person who handled those boxes? You were the only one who carried one away from the bridal suite. Naomi stepped forward from the gift table. Mrs. Whitmore handed it to her, and Ms. Cole gave it directly to me. She never opened it. Madison turned sharply. You were watching her every second? I was standing at the table when she arrived. That was not my question. Naomi's jaw tightened, but her voice remained professional. No, I was not watching her every second. I was also not watching any of the other guests every second. Ethan looked toward Tessa. Are you certain the bracelet was in the box my mother carried? Tessa's eyes filled with panic. I thought it was. There were several white boxes, and I was on the phone. I only put it down for a moment. So you do not know, Ethan said. Madison moved beside him. Why are you interrogating Tessa instead of asking your mother to cooperate? Because Tessa is the last person who remembers holding the bracelet. And your mother is the person recorded leaving with a box Claire gave her. Madison's voice rose. You keep saying that like it proves anything. Guests were now gathering beyond the cocktail tables. Claire looked toward the phones appearing in their hands and moved closer to her daughter. Madison, lower your voice. Someone stole an $80,000 family heirloom at my wedding. Evelyn held Madison's gaze. Then you should want the truth more than you want a convenient suspect. Madison gave a disbelieving laugh. Convenient. You chose me before anyone checked all available footage, searched every relevant service area, or asked whether another box had been moved. Because you were there. Many people were there. But they belong here. The sentence escaped before Madison could stop it. Ethan went still. Naomi looked down. Even Claire's expression changed. Evelyn did not raise her voice. And I do not. Madison glanced at the watching guests, aware she had said too much but unwilling to retreat. That is not what I meant. Then explain what you meant. I meant these people are family, friends, and employees we know. I'm the groom's mother. You barely know my family. That does not make me a thief. Madison folded her arms. No one called you a thief. You ordered strangers to search my purse in front of 300 guests because you were refusing to help. Evelyn removed the purse from her shoulder but did not hand it over. I will cooperate with a fair investigation. Review all available footage. Account for every box. Ask every person who entered the room the same questions. If there is a legitimate basis to inspect personal belongings, apply the same standard to everyone. Madison stared at the purse. Open it. Not while I'm the only person being treated as guilty. Ethan stepped beside his mother. She is right. Madison turned toward him. You are choosing her over me at our own reception. I am choosing basic fairness. You do not understand what this looks like. I understand exactly what it looks like. His voice was low, but the hurt inside it was unmistakable. You heard one uncertain detail and decided my mother was the easiest person to accuse. Claire reached for Madison's arm. Let Aaron review the cameras. We can handle this quietly. Madison pulled away. It stopped being quiet when she challenged me in front of everyone. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. This is not about the bracelet anymore. Do not tell me what this is about. It is about the place you decided I should occupy before I arrived. At the back table, grateful to be included and silent when I am humiliated. Madison's face flushed. You have judged me from the moment you walked into this hotel. I watched how you treated people you believed could do nothing for you. You are trying to ruin my wedding. No, I am refusing to protect the version of it you want everyone to see. The room seemed to contract around them. Madison looked at Ethan, but he did not rescue her from the truth in Evelyn's words. She looked at Claire, who was more frightened by the watching phones than by what her daughter had done. Then she looked back at Evelyn, whose calmness felt to Madison like one final act of defiance. You had no right, Madison whispered. Evelyn answered just as quietly. I asked for the truth. That is not the same thing as taking something from you. Madison's hand moved before anyone understood what she intended. The slap turned Evelyn's face beneath the ballroom lights, and the sound cut through the silence like a glass breaking. Ethan stepped between them immediately, one arm reaching back toward his mother. Across the room, Richard Whitmore stared at Evelyn's profile as recognition finally replaced confusion. He had seen that face before in the confidential Meridian equity file locked inside his office. Aaron Delgado hurried toward him, but Richard already understood that his daughter had not just struck the groom's mother. She had publicly humiliated the woman whose company could determine whether the Whitmore family still had a business by the end of the year. The room did not learn Evelyn Cole was a billionaire from a television screen, a bodyguard, or a dramatic announcement. It learned because Richard Whitmore suddenly looked more afraid of the woman his daughter had struck than of the scandal unfolding around them. Madison's hand had barely fallen to her side when Ethan stepped between her and Evelyn. His face was rigid with disbelief, and the gold band on his left hand seemed heavier than it had minutes earlier. Stay away from her, he said. Madison stared at him. She was humiliating me. You hit my mother because she would not stop. Stop doing what? Asking for evidence. Ethan's voice remained low, but every word carried through the silent reception hall. Behind him, Evelyn touched her cheek once, then lowered her hand. The mark was visible beneath the chandeliers, but her posture remained straight. She looked at Madison with outrage, which made the moment more severe. Ethan, Evelyn said, do not speak for me. He turned slightly. Mom, I know what she did. Evelyn looked toward Aaron Delgado. Please preserve every security recording from the bridal floor, the gift table, the storage room, and this reception. No one should edit, copy, or release anything until the hotel's legal department secures it. Aaron nodded immediately. I'll take care of it. Madison gave a bitter laugh. You're giving orders now? Before Evelyn could answer, Richard Whitmore pushed away from his chair and crossed the ballroom. His usual confidence had disappeared. He stopped several feet from Evelyn, searching her face as if hoping he had made a mistake. Evelyn Cole? He asked. The use of her full name changed the air in the room. Claire looked at him. Richard, what are you doing? He ignored her. Founder of Meridian Equity Group, Madison's expression shifted from anger to confusion. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, realizing the truth had arrived in the worst possible way. Evelyn met Richard Schgeisch. Yes. A wave of whispers moved through the guests. Several phones rose again. Madison looked from her father to Evelyn. What does Meridian Equity have to do with her? Richard's answer came slowly. She founded it. Claire stared at Evelyn's simple blue dress, pearl earrings, and small navy purse as if all three had become a disguise. Founded it. Aaron stepped closer. Ms. Cole created Meridian more than 25 years ago. She still owns a controlling interest and serves as its chair. Madison looked at Ethan. You knew. She is my mother. That is not what I asked. Yes, he said. I knew. Her eyes widened. You let me think she ran a small investment firm after managing apartment buildings. Evelyn answered before Ethan could. I did manage apartment buildings. I began with 3 properties on the south side and a payroll I could barely meet. Meridian came later. Madison glanced around the room, suddenly aware that the same guests who had watched her accuse Evelyn were now recalculating every word she had spoken. Why didn't anyone tell me it was Meridian? Ethan's expression hardened. Because I wanted you to respect her without knowing what she could do for you. The sentence struck harder than any public accusation. Madison looked toward Richard. Dad, why does her connection to Meridian matter so much? Richard did not want to answer, but the silence had already exposed him. Evelyn watched him carefully. Tell her, she said. He looked at the guests, then at the phones recording from every angle. Whitmore Hospitality has been in discussions with Meridian about a possible investment. How large? Ethan asked. Richard hesitated. Large enough to refinance our debt and continue operations. Claire moved closer to him. This is not the place. You were willing to search my purse in this place, Evelyn said. The truth can stand in the same room. Madison shook her head. So this is some kind of test. You came here hiding the name of your company so you could judge us. There was no test, Evelyn replied. My son asked me not to announce my connection to Meridian because he wanted today to be about his marriage. You watched me the entire day. I watched how you treated people. Madison's eyes flashed. And now you're going to destroy my father's company because I lost my temper? No business decision will be made because you struck me. Evelyn's voice remained calm. And being wealthy does not make what happened to me more wrong. It was wrong when you believed I had nothing. The room went silent again. Naomi Brooks lowered her eyes, but the relief on her face was visible. Aaron's phone vibrated. He checked the screen, then looked toward Evelyn. Security found another camera angle covering the bridal suite and a room. Madison turned sharply. What does it show? Aaron opened a sequence of synchronized security recordings on his tablet and showed them to Evelyn, Ethan, Madison, Claire, Tessa, and the two security officers. The footage showed Tessa Lane near the service cart outside the open suite doorway, speaking on her phone while holding the velvet jewelry case. It showed her placing the bracelet inside a white gift box, closing the lid, and sliding the box in a line with several identical packages. A second camera showed Claire handing that same box to Evelyn. Additional footage showed Evelyn delivering it to the gift table. A staff member then moved several packages towards storage, but one was mistakenly placed beneath a linen-covered service table near the ballroom kitchen. Naomi hurried with Aaron to retrieve it. When they returned, Aaron placed the unopened box on a table and lifted the lid in front of the witnesses. Beneath the cards and silver cake knife lay the antique diamond bracelet. Tessa covered her mouth. I forgot I put it there. Madison stared at the bracelet as if it had betrayed her. Ethan looked at his wife. My mother was innocent. Madison's lips parted, but no apology came. Richard stepped closer to Evelyn, his voice dropping into the careful tone of a man trying to rescue a negotiation. Miss Cole, what happened here was unacceptable. Madison is under extraordinary pressure, and I assure you this does not represent our family or our company. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. That remains to be determined. Richard's face changed. What do you mean? Meridian's investment committee has been reviewing Whitmore Hospitality for several weeks. She glanced toward Naomi, then toward the hotel employees standing at the edges of the room. Tonight did not create our concerns. It only gave them a face. Richard went pale. Evelyn continued, her voice quiet enough to force everyone to listen. Our preliminary audit found serious financial, governance, and employee relations concerns that require a much closer examination. Madison finally understood that the slap had not endangered a perfect wedding. It had exposed a family already standing at the edge of something far larger. And when Evelyn turned toward Ethan, the pain in her eyes made one truth impossible to ignore. The next decision would not belong to money, Richard, or Madison. It would belong to the man, still wearing a wedding ring he no longer seemed certain he wanted. The second truth destroyed Madison Whitmore's marriage more completely than the first. Evelyn Cole's billions were not the reason the investment was in danger, but Madison's apology revealed that money was still the only consequence she truly understood. The antique bracelet rested inside its white gift box on a small table near the ballroom entrance, glittering beneath the chandeliers as proof that Evelyn had been accused, publicly treated as guilty, and struck for something she had never done. Around it, 300 wedding guests stood in uneasy silence while hotel employees remained near the walls, uncertain whether they were still serving a celebration or witnessing the collapse of one. Madison stared at the bracelet, then at the phones raised across the ballroom. The anger had drained from her face, leaving panic behind. "I made a mistake," she said. Her voice was barely louder than the air conditioning. Evelyn watched her without responding. Madison swallowed and tried again. "I was frightened. That bracelet belonged to my grandmother, and everything was happening at once." Ethan stood several feet away, his shoulders rigid beneath his tuxedo. "You accuse my mother without evidence. I thought the video proved it." "The video showed her carrying a box your mother handed her." "I didn't know that then." Naomi Brooks looked toward the floor, but Evelyn kept her eyes on Madison. "You knew enough to ask whether anyone else should be searched," Evelyn said. "You chose not to." Madison's lips trembled. "I am sorry." The words arrived cleanly, but something inside them felt unfinished. Evelyn had heard apologies from executives after workers were injured, from landlords after families lost heat in January, and from lenders after discovering the woman they had dismissed controlled more capital than they did. She had learned that regret often became sincere only when consequences entered the room. "What are you sorry for?" she asked. Madison looked confused. "For what happened?" "Which part?" "For accusing you. For losing my temper." Evelyn waited. Madison glanced at Ethan, then at Richard, searching for the answer that might stop the evening from getting worse. "And for hitting you," she added. "Are you sorry because it was wrong?" Evelyn asked. "Or because you now know who I am?" Madison's face tightened. "That isn't fair. Fairness was exactly what I asked for." Richard stepped between them with both hands slightly raised. "This conversation should continue privately. Everyone is emotional, and there are business matters being mentioned that cannot be responsibly discussed in a ballroom." Evelyn turned toward him. "The business concerns existed before tonight." "Preliminary concerns," Richard said quickly. "Issues that can be corrected once Meridian understands the full context." Aaron Delgado exchanged a look with Naomi. Ethan noticed. "What issues?" he asked. Richard's attention remained on Evelyn. "Routine matters that arise during any large transaction. Unpaid vendors are not routine to the people waiting for their money," Evelyn said. "Neither are employee complaints that disappear without investigation." Madison looked at her father. "What is she talking about?" Richard forced his voice to remain controlled. "Whitmore Hospitality expanded aggressively after the pandemic. Cash flow has been temporarily constrained." Evelyn's expression did not change. The audit identified substantial overdue obligations to contractors, food suppliers, laundry services, and independent maintenance businesses. A murmur spread through the employees near the ballroom doors. Richard's jaw tightened. "Those balances are part of a restructuring plan, a plan that depends on Meridian's investment. That is the purpose of investment capital. Investment capital is not meant to conceal whether the financial statements presented to us reflect the company's actual condition." Claire moved beside Richard. "Are you accusing my husband of fraud at our daughter's wedding?" "I am saying the audit raised serious questions about financial reporting, omitted maintenance liabilities, and employee complaints alleging that promotion decisions were influenced by race, age, and family connections." Naomi slowly lifted her head. Richard looked toward her, and the fear in her expression told Ethan that none of this was abstract. "Naomi," Ethan said gently, "is that true?" Madison turned sharply. Naomi hesitated before answering. "I filed 2 complaints." "About what?" "I was passed over for an assistant director position after performing the job for 8 months. The role went to a regional vice president's nephew who had worked at the hotel for 11 weeks. Richard frowned. "That decision was based on leadership potential." "I trained him," Naomi replied. Her voice remained respectful, but it no longer sounded afraid. "Human Resources closed my complaint without interviewing the staff who worked under me." Other employees near the wall began looking at one another. A banquet server raised her hand slightly. "Mine was closed too." Another employee spoke from beside the kitchen doors. "So was mine." The wedding ballroom changed in that moment. The workers who had spent the evening moving quietly behind expensive guests were no longer part of the background. Evelyn looked at Richard. "Tonight did not create this culture." Richard lowered his voice. You cannot judge an entire organization by a few dissatisfied employees and one family dispute. That is why Meridian conducted an audit. Madison stepped toward Evelyn, gathering the skirt of her gown in one hand. "Please," she said. "I apologized. What else do you want me to do?" For the first time, her voice carried something close to desperation. "Do you want me to apologize in front of everyone again?" "I will. I will make a statement. I will personally speak to your investment committee." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Why would you speak to them?" Madison looked toward her father. "Because this deal affects thousands of employees. You mean it affects your family?" "It affects both." "And if Meridian were not involved?" Evelyn asked. "If I were only a woman your husband loved, with no company to save yours, what would your apology sound like then?" Madison opened her mouth, but Richard answered for her. "That hypothetical does not help anyone." Ethan looked at him. "It helps me." Madison turned toward her husband. "Ethan, I know today became a disaster, but we cannot let one terrible moment destroy everything." He stared at her as though he were seeing not one moment, but every warning he had dismissed. The seating chart, the way she spoke to Naomi, the words in the bridal suite, the accusation, the slap, and now an apology aimed past his mother toward a financial rescue. "You keep calling it one moment," he said, "because it was." "No, the slap was one moment. Everything before it was a choice." Madison reached for his hand. "We just got married." Ethan looked down at her fingers, touching his wedding band. Then, slowly, he pulled his hand away. "I married the person I believed you were." Madison's face crumpled. "I'm still that person." Ethan removed the gold ring and held it between his thumb and forefinger, the ballroom lights reflecting from its surface. "That is what I am afraid of." He placed the ring on the table beside the recovered bracelet. Two pieces of jewelry now rested under the chandeliers. One that had been falsely blamed for the evening's collapse, and one that marked the moment Ethan finally stopped blaming pressure for revealing the truth. Madison stared at the ring, unable to speak. Ethan stepped beside his mother, but Evelyn did not look victorious. She looked heartbroken for the son whose wedding had lasted less than one night. Richard's phone began vibrating in his pocket. He checked the screen and went pale. The message was from Meridian Equity's Independent Investment Committee. Their scheduled final review had concluded, and the decision would be announced before midnight. The decision that ended Whitmore Hospitality's rescue arrived 11 minutes before midnight. But the first thing Evelyn Cole asked was not how much the Whitmores would lose. It was how many employees might miss their next paycheck. Richard stood beside the recovered bracelet with his phone in one hand, reading the message from Meridian Equity's Independent Investment Committee while the last pieces of his daughter's reception continued collapsing around him. At its scheduled final review, the committee had voted to withdraw from the proposed investment after reviewing the unpaid vendor balances, disputed financial reporting, unresolved discrimination complaints, and the risk created by Whitmore Hospitality's leadership culture. The decision had been made without Evelyn's vote. She had formally recused herself from the committee's final recommendation and vote when Ethan became engaged to Madison, precisely so no one could claim that family loyalty or personal anger controlled Meridian's capital. Richard read the message twice, then looked at Evelyn as if she could reverse it with one sentence. "You can call them," he said. "They will listen to you." Evelyn's cheek still carried the faint mark of Madison's slap. "They listened to the evidence. This company employs more than 4,000 people, which is why your leadership should have paid vendors, reported its numbers honestly, and investigated employee complaints before asking someone else to carry the risk." Claire stepped toward her. "You cannot allow one terrible evening to destroy thousands of lives." Naomi Brooks stood near the ballroom wall with several employees who had finally spoken about their own complaints. Evelyn looked at them before answering. This evening did not create the danger to those jobs. It revealed who had already placed them in danger. Richard lowered his voice. "What do you want?" "Tonight, nothing from you." Evelyn turned to Aaron Delgado. "Please make certain every employee working this reception is paid for the full scheduled shift, including gratuities. No one should lose wages because the event ended early." Aaron nodded. "I'll confirm it personally." Madison remained near the head table, staring at the wedding ring Ethan had placed beside the bracelet. Her gown still looked perfect from across the room, but she no longer looked like a bride. She looked like someone standing inside the ruins of an identity she had expected everyone else to protect. "Ethan," she said, "please don't leave like this." He had removed his tuxedo jacket and folded it over one arm. "How else should I leave? We need to talk without everyone watching. We had private moments all day. You used them to move my mother away from our table and tell your mother you could tolerate her for one evening." Madison's eyes filled. "I was under pressure. You keep using pressure as if it chose for you. I made a terrible mistake. You made a series of decisions, and everyone became worse when someone refused to obey you." She stepped closer. "We can get counseling. We can postpone the honeymoon. We can handle the business situation separately." Ethan looked at her carefully. "You are still trying to separate what happened from who you are. You cannot know who I am from one day." "No, but today showed me what you do when people cannot give you status, convenience, or control." Madison glanced toward Evelyn. This is what she wanted. Evelyn did not react, but Ethan did. "My mother asked me not to make a decision while I was angry. She protected your chance more than you did." Madison's voice broke. "We are married." Ethan looked at the bare place on his finger. "For less than a day, and the signed license has not yet been returned to the county clerk." Madison went still. The officiant had handed the completed document to Ethan after the ceremony, and it remained sealed inside his briefcase upstairs. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying I will speak with an attorney tomorrow about the proper way to end this before either of us build a legal or financial life around it." Claire gasped. Richard closed his eyes, but Madison stared only at Ethan. "You would throw away our entire relationship because of your mother?" "No," he said. "I am ending it because of what you did to her, to Naomi, and to every person you believed had less power than you." He walked toward Evelyn, and together they moved through the ballroom toward the exit. The crowd separated without being asked. No one applauded. Evelyn would have hated that. Justice did not need an audience celebrating someone else's humiliation. It needed consequences that lasted after the phones were lowered. Outside, cold air swept along Michigan Avenue as Ethan and Evelyn waited beneath the hotel awning for their car. Ethan stared through the glass doors at the room where he had expected to begin his married life. "I should have seen it earlier," he said. "You saw what you were ready to see. That is not much of an excuse. It is not an excuse. It is where honesty begins." He looked at her cheek. "I am sorry. You did not strike me. I brought you into a family that treated you like you needed permission to belong." Evelyn took his hand. "You also stood beside me when belonging became inconvenient." By sunrise, short videos from the reception had spread online. Guests had recorded Madison's accusation, Evelyn's demand for equal treatment, the slap, and the reveal of her identity. None of the footage came from Evelyn or Meridian. She instructed her communications team not to release a statement about the wedding beyond confirming that she was safe and that investment decisions were handled independently. The internet did not show the same restraint. Madison's name trended across social platforms. Commentators debated race, wealth, entitlement, and whether public shame counted as accountability. Evelyn refused every interview. Instead, she spent the next week with Meridian's restructuring attorneys developing a proposal that could protect hotel employees and small vendors if Whitmore Hospitality entered bankruptcy or a forced sale. The plan offered emergency financing only through a court-supervised process, with payroll, health benefits, and overdue small business invoices receiving priority ahead of Whitmore family equity. "They will say you are rescuing the company after withdrawing," Ethan told her. "I'm not rescuing the family that controlled it," Evelyn replied. "I am protecting the people who never controlled what happened." 3 weeks later, Whitmore Hospitality missed a debt payment. Its lenders installed an independent restructuring officer. Richard temporarily surrendered operational authority, and regulators began reviewing the financial statements Meridian's audit had questioned. Ethan filed for divorce. Because he and Madison had no shared assets, no children, and had never established a married household, and because Madison eventually chose not to contest the petition, the case moved far more quickly than she expected. She released a carefully written public apology that mentioned stress, grief, and personal growth, but never named Naomi or the employees whose complaint her family had ignored. Evelyn did not respond. Then, nearly 6 months after the reception, a plain envelope arrived at Meridian's Chicago office. There was no publicist's return address, no lawyer's letterhead, and no request for a meeting with the investment committee. Inside were 2 handwritten letters. One was addressed to Naomi Brooks. The other was addressed to Evelyn. The first sentence did not mention the wedding, the company, the viral video, or forgiveness. It said only, "I've spent 6 months learning how often I apologize for consequences instead of the harm I caused." Evelyn read the line twice, then looked toward the city beyond her office windows. For the first time since the reception, Madison was not asking to be rescued. She was asking to be heard. 6 months after Madison Whitmore's wedding ended with a slap, a missing bracelet, and a marriage that lasted less than a day, Evelyn Cole finally agreed to meet her. Not because forgiveness had been earned, but because the apology had stopped asking for a reward. By then, Whitmore Hospitality no longer belonged to the Whitmore family. A court-supervised sale had transferred most of its hotels to a new ownership group under strict labor and vendor protections developed with Meridian Equity's restructuring team. More than 90% of hourly employees kept their jobs, payroll and health benefits were protected first, and hundreds of small contractors received settlements before Richard and Claire Whitmore recovered a single dollar of family equity. Richard resigned from every executive position and remained under investigation for financial reporting practices. Claire quietly disappeared from the charity boards and social committees that had once made her name familiar across Chicago. Their penthouse was listed for sale, their invitations stopped arriving, and the people they had treated as permanent friends became suddenly difficult to reach. Evelyn took no pleasure in any of it. Consequences were necessary, but humiliation was not the same thing as justice. Justice was Naomi Brooks walking through the Grand Marlowe lobby with a new title on her badge, Director of Employee Development and Guest Operations. She now led a training program that prepared frontline workers for management roles, required written explanations when promotion complaints were denied, and gave employees direct access to an independent ethics office. The program had been Naomi's design. Meridian funded its first year, but Evelyn refused to attach her name to it. "People already assume you handed me this position," Naomi told her during their first meeting after the restructuring. "Then make them regret ever doubting you earned it," Evelyn replied. Ethan had returned to his legal work with a housing nonprofit. The divorce was finalized without a prolonged public fight. He declined every interview, removed himself from social media, and spent months asking himself why he had defended Madison's behavior before the wedding simply because admitting the truth would have threatened the future he wanted. He and Evelyn grew closer during that time, not because the reception had made them heroes, but because both of them stopped pretending strength meant carrying pain alone. Madison's first public apology had vanished from the news cycle within days. The handwritten letters were different. Naomi received hers first and chose not to answer for several weeks. When she finally did, she wrote only that accountability required action where no cameras were present. Madison took the advice seriously enough to resign from the family company before the sale was completed. She began working quietly with a community organization that provided legal and employment support to hotel workers, initially performing administrative tasks no one considered impressive. She did not announce it online. She did not ask Evelyn to notice. That was why Evelyn agreed to the meeting. They met on a cold November afternoon in a small private room at the Grand Marlowe, the same hotel where the wedding had taken place. The ballroom was hosting a medical conference that day. No flowers covered the entrance, no photographers waited by the stairs, and no one in the lobby recognized Madison immediately. She wore a simple gray coat, no designer jewelry, and carried a notebook filled with handwritten pages. Evelyn arrived alone in a dark green suit. Madison stood when she entered. "Thank you for coming." "I came to listen," Evelyn said. "That is not the same as coming to forgive you." Madison nodded. "I understand." They sat across from one another at a small wooden table. For several seconds, Madison looked at her hands. "I used to think the worst thing I did was slap you." Evelyn waited. It was the most visible thing, Madison continued. But it began before that. I decided where you belonged before you arrived. I treated Naomi as if her professionalism existed for my convenience. I believed people close to my family were more trustworthy than people I had placed beneath us. And when I was proven wrong, my first fear was losing the investment. Her voice shook, but she did not look toward the door or reach for sympathy. I'm not asking you to tell me I'm a different person now. 6 months is not enough time to prove that. No, Evelyn said. It is not. I am asking whether change is still possible after someone has shown the worst part of themselves. Evelyn considered the question. Change is possible. Trust is slower. Madison nodded again. I know Ethan does not owe me another conversation. He does not. I know Naomi does not owe me friendship. She does not. And you do not owe me forgiveness. Evelyn leaned back slightly. Then what do you believe you owe them? Madison looked down at the notebook. Consistency, even when no one is checking. Even when changing does not restore anything I lost. For the first time, Evelyn saw no calculation behind the answer. That did not erase the ballroom, the accusation, or the sound of the slap. It did something smaller and more honest. It left room for the possibility that Madison had finally begun the work she once expected an apology to replace. I accept that you are trying, Evelyn said. I do not yet accept that you have changed. Madison's eyes filled, but she did not protest. That is fair. Fairness is where this began. When the meeting ended, Evelyn found Ethan waiting in the lobby near the tall windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. He had not entered the room or asked what Madison said. How did it go? He asked. She did not ask me to rescue her. Ethan looked toward the closed door. That is something. It is a beginning, not a conclusion. They walked through the hotel lobby together, passing employees who now greeted Naomi as a director. Across the city, vendors who had waited months were finally receiving payment. The Whitmore name had disappeared from the ownership plaque, but the building remained open, the staff remained employed, and the people once treated as background now helped decide how the hotel was run. Outside, evening light reflected off the Chicago River. Ethan offered his arm, and Evelyn took it. The money Madison had failed to recognize had never been the most important truth in the room. Evelyn's wealth did not restore Ethan's marriage, transform an apology into forgiveness, or make injustice wrong. It only revealed what people had chosen when they believed she had no power. What finally changed their lives was something money could not purchase. A son who chose character over appearances, workers who chose to speak after years of silence, and a woman who proved that dignity was not the reward for being powerful. It was what proved she had always belonged in the room, and the reason she had become powerful without losing herself.